Amen. Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom l'kulam. Good to see everyone. Today, actually, as I'm sure everyone knows, is an important day in in American history, Juneteenth. And as I think about it, I have to admit that I don't know exactly what to say. Do I say Ashamnu or do I say Shehecheyanu? Ashamnu, not just for not marking this holiday until now, because neither I nor Bethel have ever marked it, but not just Ashamnu for that, but for not doing enough over the years to become really anti-racist, as we all should. Ashamnu for our nation's original sin of slavery and for our ongoing sin of systemic racism. Or should we say Shehecheyanu for a day that marks freedom, imperfect as it is? Shehecheyanu for life, recognizing what has been denied to George Floyd and countless others because of the color of their skin. Ashamnu or Shehecheyanu, it's a day of mixed messages, and we're asked to embrace it in all of its complexity. I'm thankful to have with us tonight one of our members and a friend, Jessi Kingston, who I think will help us understand the significance of this day and this time in American history that we're living through. Jessi, as some of you know, is a successful executive professional with 20 years experience in public and private sectors, advancing diversity and racial equity within communities by transforming organizational cultures with consensus building and breaking down barriers. As a former member and chair of the Edina Human Rights Commission and co-chair of the Edina Race and Equity Task Force, Jessi has been in the front of a range of municipal and statewide human and civil rights issues and proved to be a leader in the human rights arena. From 2012 to 2018, she served as the Director of Human Rights and Equal Economic Opportunity for the city of St. Paul. Among other things, today she serves on the board of Temple Israel and the Commission on Social Action and on Project for Pride in Living. I had the privilege, along with a number of you, to travel to the South on a civil rights journey a couple of years ago with Jessi that was important for all of us, but in particular, Jessi helped all of us see the experience and see America's past with a different set of lenses that truly none of us can really appreciate. And I'm thankful that she's here with us again tonight to share her reflections on not only our Torah reading, but as I said, on this time in our nation's history.
Thank you, Rabbi Davis. It's wonderful to be here with everyone this Shabbat, which is taking a lot of new historic means. So it's an honor, really, and a privilege to be able to be here with all of you and speak. When I left my job as the director of the Department of Human Rights and Equal Economic Opportunity for the city of St. Paul towards the end of 2018, I needed time to heal and recover. I had been knee-deep in racial equity work, which included taking over the management of the Police Civilian Internal Affairs Review Commission from the police department. The commission was responsible for reviewing police officer misconduct complaints and making disciplinary recommendations to the chief of police. An audit done by the University of Minnesota recommended reforming the commission to create more transparency, accountability, and independence from the police department following high-profile racial incidents. When I assumed responsibility for the commission and implemented the University of Minnesota's recommendations, of which several became law, I didn't expect to become a victim of the police department's deep-rooted racism. I left my job broken to my core. Not long after I healed from that experience, I was re-traumatized as I and the world watched the unjustified harassment and murder of Black men and women over the past few months. We agonizingly watched George Floyd die in 8 minutes and 46 seconds as Minneapolis police officers kneeled on his neck and body. We learned of Breonna Taylor's murder in her bed after police officers executed a no-knock warrant. We watched Rayshard Brooks die the day before he was going to celebrate his daughter's birthday. And we saw two college students, Tania Pilgrim and Messiah Young, tased and pulled from their car in Atlanta. These incidents are never ending and a reminder that Black people are often still viewed by the white dominant culture as less than a whole person. As protests against police brutality expanded beyond Minneapolis following the murder of George Floyd, thousands of people have been subjected to tear gas, rubber bullets, tasers, flash bombs, and beatings by the same institution we're protesting against, police officers' excessive use of force. The tactics police officers used to try and quell the demand for police reform didn't stop the protests. We haven't given up after seeing the images of police vehicles driving into crowds of protesters in New York City and Richmond, Virginia. We haven't stopped protesting after a white 75-year-old man was pushed and left to bleed on the ground as police officers walked by. So far, nothing has stopped us from demanding justice. Over the past few weeks, I've had several white friends contact me to find out how I'm doing. I tell them I'm overwhelmed, exhausted, scared, and tired. I worry about my safety, and I tense up every time I see a police officer. Recently, the conversations have turned to our national holiday, Juneteenth. On January 1st, 1863, President Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation declaring enslaved Black people free. However, it was more than 2.5 years before the last group of enslaved Black people were freed in Texas on June 19th, 1865, now recognized as Juneteenth. People began to ask me how I am celebrating Juneteenth this year. I often surprise people when I say, I don't celebrate Juneteenth. While the emancipation of enslaved Black people is something to celebrate, with all the harassment and continued violence against Black people we have witnessed, I wondered if slavery really ended, and was I still considered a slave in America? One of the origins of policing in America was the creation of slave patrols beginning in 1704. Slave patrols were charged with chasing down, apprehending, and returning to their owners runaway enslaved Black people, providing a form of organized terror to deter slave revolts, and maintaining a form of discipline for slave workers who were subjected to summary justice outside the law. Slave patrols also stole free Black people and sold them into slavery. After slavery ended, the power police officers had to control the lives of Black people never ended. Police officers began to enforce Jim Crow segregation laws that denied free enslaved Black people equal rights and access to freely participate as a member of our society. Instead of returning Black people to slave owners, Black people have been disproportionately incarcerated and killed without due process at the hands of police officers. While enduring these horrendous incidents, Black people have been subjected to another kind of harassment, specifically white people who've taken the law into their own hands against Black people. 3 white men hunted down and murdered Ahmaud Arbery, who was jogging around his community. A white woman called the police on Christian Cooper because he dared to ask her to leash her dog in an area of the park where dogs were required to be leashed. Another white woman called the police and blocked Shanika Montgomery Strickland from leaving the parking lot of a grocery store because the woman was upset Montgomery Strickland's son stood on a shelf to grab a bottle of Gatorade. These are but a few examples of ways in which Black people have been prevented from freely living their lives every day. Some might even say this is a new form of slavery in America. Several friends and I have talked about generational trauma and abuse beginning with our ancestors who were enslaved Black people in America. I shared my belief that I wouldn't have survived the harsh conditions of enslavement. I was too mouthy, pig-headed, and would have rebelled against the possibility of being raped by my master. I was sure that if I hadn't been killed by all the whip lashings for my defiance against the system, I likely would have been killed trying to escape to freedom. My friends disagreed with me, telling me I was strong, resourceful, and a problem solver. They were certain I would have found both the will and the way to survive the harsh conditions of enslavement because I'm surviving the oppression that exists today. This view was in stark contrast to what we study in this week's Torah portion. After scouting the land of Canaan for 40 days, all but 2 of Moses' emissaries believed the people who inhabited the country were more powerful and of great size than they were. The emissaries viewed themselves as grasshoppers, unable to take possession of the land. Instead of trying to move forward, people cried out, believing it was better to go back to Egypt. They hadn't yet overcome the feelings of inferiority from being enslaved. In my heart, as a Jew of color and as a Black woman, I've never viewed myself as a grasshopper. In America, it is the white dominant culture who hasn't gotten past the belief that Black people are less than 3/5 a person. Instead, I've been fighting for the right to be treated as a free, whole person. Over the past several months, the world has been shuttered as the coronavirus spreads like wildfires, infecting millions and killing more than 450,000 people. The shutdown created an opening for the white dominant culture to see and experience the violent impact racism has been having on Black and brown people in America. We haven't been able to turn a blind eye because our daily lives have been disrupted. We are no longer running from home to work to events and back home again, exhausted from the day. We aren't fighting traffic that has been shut down due to a protest. We aren't tearing apart the victims' actions. We are seeing, without distractions, the horrors of racism and how racism is embedded in our society. This year, in the aftermath of George Floyd's murder, Juneteenth has given us the beginnings of truly confronting and dismantling racism. Confederate statues are being torn down. Companies are rebranding products whose images and names are rooted in racial stereotypes. And we are starting to see the beginnings of holding police officers accountable for their actions. As I drive around town, I am now seeing Black Lives Matter signs in people's yards. There have been more white people waving and saying hello, no longer intentionally avoiding my eyes as I pass by. I'm overcome with mixed emotions and cautiously optimistic, knowing we cannot let this moment go by. We must lean in as we have more work to do to dismantle racism in our society and affirm that Black lives matter. Achieving racial equity is tough work, which includes overcoming biases, reconciliation, and repairing. I was recently reminded that Rabbi Tarfon used to say, "It is not your duty to finish the work, but neither are you at liberty to neglect it." As a Jew of color, I'm asking my white Jews to take racism off the shelf, dust it off, and to do the hard work to dismantle racism. We must change our laws, policies, and practices, reconcile and repair the harm so that no one is treated or viewed as a slave in America again. We can no longer neglect this work. And if we do the work, perhaps next year or in the years to come, we can truly celebrate the meaning of Juneteenth. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Todah Rabah. Thank you so much, Jessi, for those beautiful and important words.